perspective on what we're dealing with in the riverfront development by calling your attention to 1996 when the 4-lane viaduct over the river was finished, which put the 2-lane viaduct with the Art Deco bridge piers out of commission. And as a result of that Art Deco bridge pier, all of the steelwork was taken out, and what was left were the East Bridge Pier and the West Bridge Pier. And the City Commission at that time decided it would be a good idea to demolish both. And a guy by the name of Blaine Thomas, who in 1935 was a young boy who watched that bridge being constructed because it had been destroyed in the flood of 1935. And what he marveled at was the ability and the skill of the hundreds of laborers who were putting that bridge or building that bridge, which was one of the finest bridges in the area at that time. And it was built during 1936 and 1937. It was part of him growing up, and he really appreciated it. So when the commission said we're going to demolish it, he went to the city commission, as all of us could do as part of a democracy, along with 3 other people, and suggested that that was not a good idea, that we should not demolish that bridge pier. And he prevailed. They changed their mind, they didn't do it. Now what we didn't know is that at that time, Blaine also drew a rendering of what is now on the bridge pier, Manhattan Welcomes You, but he didn't show it to anybody, or if he did, nothing ever happened. Until 2011, when that rendering began to appear again, a couple of people saw it, pointed it out, thought it was a good idea, a nice fit for that bridge pier. Got the city commission, the county commission, and KDOT to agree to the project, raised the money to do the project, and did it. But in the process, we created a very nice statement for the river. But what it turned out to be was like an exclamation point. Because as we worked on it and looked around and stood at the river's edge and looked at the Manhattan skylight, and from the top of the viaduct viewed even a greater view of the city, and from the linear trail, the city itself, as well as the riverfront, and from the Discovery Center overlooking the whole of downtown, we realized that the bridge pier was just the beginning of it. Because we had, as Gina will tell you in a few minutes, a real opportunity here to do something really remarkable in terms of the riverfront development right before us. Stephanie is going to introduce our guest, Gina Ford.
Good evening, everyone. It's so great to see a room full of people interested in the river. So I'm going to pick up the story when we had a guest lecture at Kansas State University. I'm the department head in landscape architecture and regional and community planning, and we have the ECDAL lecture series every year. And we brought in a distinguished landscape architect, Gina Ford, to talk about her work as a landscape architect. Phil Anderson was in the audience, and as soon as her lecture was over, he made a beeline to the front and said, "Have you seen our river?" Because she had just been showing wonderful examples of other cities' rivers and the ways that they had developed them in ecologically and recreational and environmentally sound and economically viable ways. And so Phil was so excited, he kept emailing and calling Gina and saying, "Please come," and it all came together. So we're here so that we can hear from Gina Ford, who I think is giving us the double whammy. She was a principal with Sasaki, which is a landscape architecture and planning firm in Boston. and did a tremendous amount of work across the country, and in fact, award-winning work in just another couple of days. She's going to receive an honor award for work done on the Chicago riverfront, and she's now moved on to having her own office, which is Agency Landscape and Planning. So we're hearing from someone who has the legacy of one of the oldest and most established and recognized landscape architecture planning offices in the country. And she's also the hottest new thing in the country because Agency is the cool new firm, and they are doing tremendous work. So we are so fortunate to have her with us and for her to share her work with us. And then I think, based on what I see on the tables, we're going to be doing some work. So thank you.
Thank you. I can't wait to tell my husband I'm the hot new thing. He's gonna love that. Okay, let's talk about the riverfront. Whoa, I'm a little too enthusiastic for our mic. It's okay, I think it's good. Can you guys hear me okay? So I'm really sorry, can those of you in the back see the screen-ish? Want to dim the lights? You want to hit your mouth? Okay, like that. Hello? Hello? Okay, so yeah, so oh, that's great. So I apologize. We had some technical difficulties, as you come to expect when you use projectors and laptops at all. But we have a little squish screen. But hi, thank you for coming out. It was an incredible honor when Phil came up to me after the lecture here. Well, it was an incredible honor to be invited by Stephanie and team and Lauren. Nice to see you again. And then have Phil come up after and ask me to participate in this conversation, which is really, it's interesting. It's sort of a grassroots advocacy for the riverfront. And we had a great meeting this morning with some leaders from around the community to talk about what could be on the riverfront, and everyone there was really enthusiastic. And we met with city staff this afternoon, and they also share the enthusiasm about the role that really Manhattan is playing in the region, and how to stay a great place to live, how to stay competitive, how to be a place that people want to live so that you can grow sustainably and have a great quality of life, or continue having a great quality of life. And so we're really excited that the river, we think, can play a really central role in that. And so tonight what we're going to do is I'm going to talk for a little while, maybe a little less than a half hour, just to show you some observations about the river from spending time on it yesterday. So apologize, I saw it for about 2 hours, so it was just a very high-level survey of the downtown stretch. Talk a little bit about the kind of riverfront work I've done and how some of the lessons learned from that work could apply here. And then we have some fabulous Kansas State students. Can you raise your hands? One at each table, I believe. Oh, look at that. Awesome. And they are going to be facilitators at each table, helping you all express your ideas and thoughts for the riverfront. So get ready. Here we come. Here we go. Okay, so I'll do this really quick. I worked at a big firm for 20 years. I specialized in public parks and landscapes. I did everything from riverfronts and public parks to a lot of disaster recovery work, and was really happily in that practice. But as Stephanie said at the beginning of this year, I actually started my own practice. I think being a woman-led practice in this day and age is a good thing for the world. And so my partner Bree and I started our own spin-off firm called Agency Landscape and Planning. And at the center of it is the love of public work and public pursuits. And so we're really excited to talk about any project where community engagement, diversity, inclusion, equity, resilience, these kind of 21st century concerns are manifest in our public landscapes. We love collaborating, so tonight is just an example of that. I'm just so stunned by how many people came out. And you might find yourself on our website, on our collaboration page later this evening, because when you run a small business, it means I'm also the webmaster. Still, I'm 10 months in, and I'm still the webmaster. I haven't grown big enough to have someone do my website. And agencies doing work all over the country. I think the most relevant piece of work we're doing right now is a downtown plan for Bozeman, Montana, a city of a similar size and a similar character in a lot of ways to its downtown. But we also are working on the Indianapolis White River, which is a 58-mile-long strategic plan for that community, and a parks plan for Greensboro, North Carolina, looking at their park system. So we are small. We are a 4-person practice right now, but we are mighty. And we are, again, rooted in this idea of riverfront revitalization. You know, I'm a Bostonian, a native Bostonian, but my whole career has pretty much been spent for the majority of the time I've been practicing on Midwest rivers. I started in the late 90s working on the Cincinnati riverfront. This is Smale Riverfront Park in Cincinnati, Ohio. Ohio River floods about 50 feet annually, so it's a park entirely within the floodplain of the Ohio. It's been 9 phases of construction over 20 years, so an extraordinary long project. This was a swing set meant to give people a place to sit and enjoy the view of the river. I won my first project in 2008 as a principal at Sasaki. It was a small riverfront master plan, much like we're contemplating here. I shouldn't even curse us by saying this again. This is the third time, maybe is the charm. For Cedar Rapids, Iowa, it was June 12th, 2008, and I was meeting in City Hall, which is the center of this image. And they said, it's so great you're here and studying the river because we're having some rain today. We're going to have some high water. And within 2 hours, they started evacuating because the projections were so high. So what you're seeing in this image is City Hall, which is normally on an island. And you see those lines? Those are actually the rails of the bridges, the 3 bridges that cross the Cedar River. So all of downtown flooded and 10 neighborhoods while we were there. And so we went on to do 4 years of recovery planning in that community and did a lot of work with the Army Corps, which would also be super relevant here. Also, I'll show you a project in Council Bluffs that's very relevant to you. It's, again, similar community, and I'll show you all the ways its physical landscape gives us some clues about what we could do here. And as Stephanie mentioned, my baby, this all led to 10 years of work on the Chicago River, $100 million of work that I'll walk you through some of the high-level ideas about creating connection along that great river and making places for people to enjoy that natural resource. And along with that, my partner Bree, who's an urban planner, she does a lot of large-scale plans, so that's led us to places like New Orleans, looking at flood resilience in the wake of their disasters, the post-Sandy landscape here of the New Jersey shore after that disaster. So it's a unique kind of specialty that we have. A few observations about your river, which is extraordinary. I told Phil yesterday, working in places like Bozeman that has a creek run through it, and Greensboro, which has a series of small creeks, they talk all the time about how they wish they had a river. You know, what we would do if we had a river, we would just go nuts. We would make this the best city on earth. And here you are, Manhattan, Kansas, with this incredible river running through downtown. And I think it's largely invisible, except a few glimpses that you get, and real advocates and users might use it, but I bet a lot of people don't really think about how they could engage with it. It's incredibly beautiful. I mean, I've seen it now at high water right today, which is why I was nervous to bring up the whole flood story. I was like, because it's supposed to rain tonight, I'm like, oh gosh, if this happens another time. And then in February, I saw it in low kind of sandbar quality, also very beautiful. Just an incredible scenic natural asset. It is part of why you're here, why your community has chosen to be here. This is a historic map that shows both the Blue River and the Kansas River and how they changed course over time and have left these remnant oxbow patterns in the landscape. It's kind of an extraordinary story of change over many hundreds of years. And I think we think about rivers, we often call them timeless flows, right? They have been flowing long before we were here. They will be flowing long after us. They are these unstoppable, timeless natural systems. And so we all connect to them. They connect us all. Water, every drop of water that falls makes its way together. Here you see just this idea that you're part of a string of communities along the river. It's a welcoming landscape. It's the first thing you see as you cross into downtown. So it is your gateway, really, and maybe some keen observers observe that they're crossing a bridge and coming into your great downtown. We could make that a more welcoming experience and really celebrate arrival in your community, and the river is sort of a gateway to it. We have all these incredible assets like Fairmount Park that have been improved over time, have had more access, more program, more construction. There's a new levee that was built after '93, we learned today, but lots more opportunities. You don't really get the sense when you're in this park that you're on a river system, so we could imagine that differently. a series of industrial uses and working landscapes that line both the east and west banks of the river, and in a lot of ways provide jobs and economic growth, but also limit public access. And so in the future, some of these might be changing, and so there's an opportunity there to think about how to leverage the riverfront site. Having worked on a lot of rivers in the Midwest, I recognize these kinds of control gate structures. These are part of the whole flood levee protection mitigation system for flood risk reduction. And so, always considering that we need to protect the community from when the river does rise and become an incredibly dynamic system. And even today, even though it's not necessarily designed intentionally for recreation, you see lots of people using the levee top trail, lots of people using the moments of connection. This is at Wildcat Creek, and so this could be a much better bicycling environment than what it is. As lovely as these people seem to be enjoying it, it was tight, it was hot. I can imagine the summertime, it's not the most wonderful of spaces. So how can we think about making these really kind of welcoming, beautiful landscapes that embrace these uses and more? So I'll do 3 really quick stories before we jump into our brainstorming, and partly this is to show you what riverfront planning looks like in other parts of the country as a model for maybe what you all could do here, but also to maybe plant some seeds for the brainstorming about ideas and ways other communities have related to their river that we could think about here. The 3 stories are first, the Highline Canal in Denver, Colorado, a 71-mile long system that's really about community engagement and a process of visioning. The second is the Chicago Riverwalk. I want to show you my baby that took 10 years inside the belly before it came out into the world. And then the Council Bluffs Riverfront, which is the one that I've done that's most like here in terms of scale of community and physical assets and quality. So first, the Highline Canal. The Highline Canal is this really fascinating story of a handmade irrigation drainage kind of canal that was meant to deliver water from the Rocky Mountains to the prairie to make that prairie land useful for farming. And so hand dug in the late 1800s, 71 miles long. It goes from the mountains all the way to almost the Denver airport. And along the way passes through most of Denver's communities. An extraordinary heritage that interestingly has sort of outlived its useful life. It's no longer the most efficient way to deliver irrigation water, but in the 100+ years of servicing the community of Denver with water for farming, the presence of water brought about an ecosystem of cottonwood trees that now has become this green ribbon through the prairie that really is celebrated by the community. Its towpath that used to be for maintenance of the canal is now a recreational corridor that the community uses, and so it's a well-loved landscape that people really cherish. And now Denver Water, the owner of it, is thinking that this isn't necessarily the best way to deliver irrigation water anymore, so the community hired us to help them come to a shared vision because they want to protect this resource, they don't want to see it go away. As I said, it's an extraordinary 71 miles. I did it all actually in one day by car. They actually let us drive the towpath. So I get to see this incredible cross-section of, from rolling foothills of the Rocky Mountains through wooded foothills all the way to the prairie. And along the way, it passes through 17 different communities. It passes through communities of color and affluent communities and challenged communities. And so you get this incredible transect or mosaic of Denver as you move along this incredible system. And as part of our work, it was deeply community engaged, much like we're doing tonight. It was a conversation with that community about what do you want to see this resource become. We focused a lot on the youth of the region, knowing that these projects, and this one in particular, could take 20 or 30 years to realize its new formation, and so we need to build stewards at the youngest generation. They're the ones that will most likely be the beneficiaries of this planning work, and their children, and so nice to get that youth on board. We could think about that in the future here. But we asked this question, what do we want it to be? And as someone who loves cities, I imagine the community would want coffee shops and music performances and all these great things that are really urban. And they were like, we don't want anyone else in this landscape. We want to minimize the impact. We want it quiet and natural. This is the place where we see songbirds. This is where we connect with nature. We wanted to keep this kind of quiet quality. But we do want it to be connected and safe, and we do want it to be enjoyed by all the different communities along Denver. And we want to know that someone's going to manage it over time, and there's a leader in place to take care of it. And we want to know the basics. We want seating and shade. You know, it wasn't a landscape designed for people, so it didn't have all of those amenities. And so along with that, kind of those principles, we also established a physical framework that acknowledged that it wasn't 71 miles of the same thing, but it was this transect through different communities. We gave them names, the Wooded Village, the Prairie Retreat, as a way of saying, let's celebrate these unique conditions that this system moves through. And so this was work that was done over the course of a summer of visioning with the community. It was actually acknowledged by the APA as excellence in community outreach, because we really talked to thousands of people over that summer, as we would imagine you might want to do here. This is a good showing for our first night, so that's great. And now we're in the process of actually creating a series of projects along this that then demonstrate and live up to those values and principles the community established. The second project is the Chicago Riverwalk. So I like showing this project because it talks about these two really fundamental ideas of riverfront development. One, continuity of path, that you allow people to move seamlessly along the river. And second, place, that you give unique places and moments for people to enjoy and engage with the river and each other. So this was our site in Chicago. You might recognize it as this kind of canyon of space, of skyscrapers and river. The bascule bridges are famous for opening and allowing the boats to migrate between lake and river. Our site was on the left-hand side of this image, 6 blocks. That today, before our work, you had to basically go up and down stairs to get down to the river, and then up to cross the street, and then down again, and do that over and over again. And so what that meant was that those spaces were really kind of not well used or well loved. They weren't really functional. And so our client was able to work with the Coast Guard to get 20 feet of build-out space to create new land, to basically create a new path that connected all 6 of these blocks. So our concept is the concept diagram that really talks about that path, which is shown in orange, not just as a continuous thread, which it is, but also as a different shaped space in each of the blocks. So the idea was to welcome diversity by offering different programmatic opportunities. One block is about dining, another one is about kayaking, another one is about habitat and ecological. So as you think about river systems, they're big enough that you can have many different kinds of experience, all thread along a kind of common thread or walkway. This was the before condition, so you can see how gray and sad it was when we came on board. It was, again, this space that was just sort of left over, and you wouldn't really think about coming down here and spend time. There really wasn't much to do, and you couldn't move through the city on this. And this is the realized condition of that build out. So you see this pathway that becomes the continuous thread, but then you see all of these places for people to sit, to enjoy the water, even to sort of tie their boat up and get on and off the river. Here's a view looking down on it. So we made this kind of folded wooden seat element that you sit on and enjoy the river from one side, but it also folds up and becomes a bar, so you can have a glass of wine and look at the river. That all folds down and almost touches the water, so you can sit with your feet almost in the Chicago River, although it's still very dirty, so you really shouldn't put your feet in the Chicago River. But the idea of getting close to it is symbolic of this idea of stewardship and about getting meaningful connection to it. One space we dedicated to human-powered craft and made it all about kayaks, so I imagined it like an urban beach, but instead of sand, we had precast concrete. Instead of rocks, we made these seating elements that kind of mimic rocks by a shore. We planted it with beach grasses. There was a place you could come here and rent a kayak to get out on the water. So it became this place that very much felt like a place to engage with the river. And then this space is one that just opened this past, it opened a year and a half ago now, or a year and 3 months ago, but it just really had its first flourishing summer of planting. This was a room dedicated to, or a space dedicated to floating wetland gardens. So we wanted to make a place that was both about ecological learning for the people at the surface and also fun, love, and friendship for fish below the surface. And so these floating wetlands provide that habitat. They also help to clean the water. They're also lovely and tell the story of what was here before us. And as you can see in these images, on the left-hand side is a normal day on the river, people enjoying, sitting by the water. On the right-hand side was it in flood this past summer. So you see that those floating wetlands kind of rose and they fall with the river. And the whole landscape of the Chicago Riverwalk actually does flood. It was designed to do so. Just as you can imagine here, you can design walkways and public park space that can be flood resilient to the occasional inundation. As I said, we wanted to make this a space for fish. So underneath all of our structures and attached to our structures are all of these really low-cost habitat curtains and hula skirts that we put onto the columns that hold the walkway up. That enables fish to be able to hide. There's like all kinds of like small growth that happens that starts to build an ecosystem even under the walkway. And people don't even know that's there, but the fish like it, so we're happy about that. And then last image on Chicago, between each of the blocks you have to pass under these bridges, right? And if you've been in Chicago, the bridges that cross the river are like metalwork, they're open metalwork, so as you pass under them, things can fall down on you. There's famous stories about things falling down that shouldn't have fell down and hurting people below. So as part of our work, Carol Ross Barney, our partner architect, designed these metal sheaths that basically protect the pedestrian as they're passing under the bridge, but also do this really magical thing of catching the light and the reflection of the water. So these spaces that are typically, and you might imagine like passing under your bridge here on the levee, dark and maybe a little bit scary, becomes instead magic and light filled. And so people that experience this passage often write to Carol, write to me and just say, I didn't understand that the river was mine, that it belonged in my city, or I never felt so close with it as I felt as I walked through this space. So even without touching it, you're giving people the experience of connecting, and that builds stewardship, hopefully, to help clean the river over time. Cool, right? Okay, last story. This is the community that's most like you. This is, and I say that no community is alike, but it's similar in scale. It's 60,000 people or so. It's called Council Bluffs, Iowa. It's across the river. This is a little different, across the river from Omaha, Nebraska. So it's got a big metropolitan population across the way, but it's similar in scale to you, and interestingly, it has a lot of the same physical characteristics as you do as well. It was a 100-acre green space. As you can see, this is on the Missouri River. 100 acres of green space kind of strung out on the east side of the river. And a community that had some capacity to build public space, but also was limited because it's a relatively small community. The city of Omaha had just built, as you can see the mouse here, the Bob Carey pedestrian bridge, which is this incredible $20 million 1 mile long bridge that spans between Nebraska and Iowa. You can actually stand on the middle of the bridge and be in both states for a moment. And when it was built, it was this incredible regional success story because up until then you couldn't walk over the river. It was too big, and the only other connection was highway scaled and not for people. So this new bridge landed in Iowa, and poor Iowa hadn't done anything yet to receive it. So there were all these jokes about it, the bridge to nowhere, and there's nothing to do when you cross over, and people would walk over and then walk back right away. And so Council Bluffs hired us to think about what would an appropriate landing be for this incredible bridge. And so because it's a modest-sized community, we said, let's focus all of our energy in that little moment, that moment where the bridge meets the levee on the side of the river in Iowa. And let's make this great community space that we called the window. We wanted to cut through the forest, create this, what we saw as a window to Omaha, where Omaha and Council Bluffs would look at each other across the river and create a platform for both communities to come together. That would be the most appropriate kind of landing. And so that's what we did. This is a zoom in. So what you're seeing is Omaha on the left-hand side, the Missouri River, about 1,200 feet of floodplain forests. The red line is a 15-foot high levee, positive in the landscape, so it's sticking out like a mound in the landscape. And then this neighborhood with a big kind of old park that was there that the city had seen as a potential redevelopment site. And so this is very similar to what we see here, except you also, on top of having river floodplain forest, I'm thinking about what's right outside our window right here, and then levee, you also have then railroad line and some roadway infrastructure, right? So a lot of barriers kind of stacked up between the community and the river. And so in Council Bluffs, what we decided to do was, first of all, to take that potential redevelopment site, which was lower than the levee, and actually raise it up to be the same height as the levee, and then put new buildings on top of it. One, because it gets those buildings out of the floodplain, And two, then those buildings have this great view of the riverfront, and it's easy for people to move between the two spaces. And so here's the plan as we imagined it, this window cut through the forest that becomes this great big lawn, 4-acre lawn for soccer and sports day to day, but then big community festivals for the region. You see this kind of landing, this little plaza and square where the bridge kind of swoops in and lands, and all of that is up at that upper level, so now you have this great view from that space across the lawn. And then you see this kind of development pattern, these like rectangles that really represent future development sites that we imagined could take advantage of this great new park and access to the riverfront. So here it is realized, this is the idea of the windows. You see we kind of reinforce the forest by planting new trees along one side. We built big, beautiful lights that could help to make this a nighttime activated soccer and event space. And that the window is oriented towards this great view of Omaha's skyline. Creates this platform for the community to come together. They've had events from 15 to 20,000 people, which even for this much bigger population than you all is a really big draw for them. And so they have concerts here and movie nights and performances. We also, and I think this is a really important thing to think about here, we also reshaped the levee. I think one of the worst parts about levees as a designer is that they're the same shape monotonously through the landscape, and they have no relationship to context, really. I mean, occasionally you get a walkway that goes up to them or a floodgate, but otherwise they're just the same thing over and over again. So we kind of wanted to de-levee the levee and make it something sculptural. So we built out on the wetland side this amphitheater of sculpted seat walls that both reinforces and adds more kind of mass to the levee, so it's not hurting it or compromising it, but also made it more gracious for people. And also, again, made it a place. So this is it when the high school track team's doing drills on it, and here it is during a performance. So the idea was, 2,000 people can sit here and see a small-scale performance, or 17 to 20,000 people can be on the big lawn, or those spaces could work together. So it was meant to be customized to this community. And as I said, this was just this past summer. I just love this image of the idea of just movie night out on the park, right on the river, so you hear the Missouri River rushing by and you're watching a movie. And we just completed the plaza at the top of the levee, which is really that landing space. This is actually an image that was when they were testing the fog fountain. So we had this idea that, and I'd love that here, that we'd make a fountain just off the levee, so when bikers are going by and they're hot, they can just drive off and drive through and keep going and sort of have a cooling moment. But it's also a great place for kids. Hopefully there's not kids hiding in the fog when that happens. I mean, I don't think I totally thought that through. But the idea is like just these moments of placemaking that really celebrate connection for people. And excitingly, this is the development plan that has now come online since the park was made, because when you build a little park, you might think it's just a little park, but people want to be near it. It incentivizes new kinds of economic development. So there's an office building and some residential properties that are now under development here, taking advantage of this great new asset of the riverfront park and really making something great out of what was a little bit of a leftover space. And so we've sort of shifted the park to the river and created this new flood resilient neighborhood really on the riverside. So those were the 3 stories I curated for you. I could have done many more, but I thought those were the most relevant to help you think about, first, how do we start a community conversation about the river? Second, how do we think about connecting our river? And third, what are the real opportunities for placemaking and activation here? And so, are you all ready to do some thinking? Okay. Take a breath, and then I'm going to explain to you what's going to happen. Everyone that's a Gemini, stand up. No, I'm just kidding. Just kidding. Okay, Kansas State students, you ready? Okay, so really hard to brainstorm in a group this big, right? What do I need? You pointing to me? Is that Avery? Is he pointing? Oh, I was like, what do you want me to say, Avery? All right. Is it okay?
No.
There's a what? Oh, there's a seat for you. Guy in the red shirt, there's a seat for you. Okay. Sorry, you shouldn't be funny about community members that don't have seats. Hi, thank you for joining us. All right, so what we are going to do, it's really hard to brainstorm in a big group. This gentleman named Devano came up with this idea called the six thinking hats. The 6 thinking hats is an exercise we're going to do, and it's going to make you feel ridiculous, so thanks for coming. Where we're all going to wear the same hat at the same time. And each hat represents a different kind of strategy in brainstorming. So, right now, I'm actually wearing the white hat of information, because I'm basically giving you guys the rules of the game, how we're going to play. We're not really going to wear the white hat, it's kind of boring. And I think the presentation, in a lot of ways, was the information. We're going to start with the red hat, which is the hat of emotion. And y'all are going to tell me how you feel about this problem of the riverfront. Then we're going to move on to the green hat. The green hat is my favorite hat. That's the hat where we just dream big together. And we just think about the biggest, boldest, biggest future for the river we can imagine. And then we're going to wear the black hat. The black hat's the critique hat. And the black hat is what's the challenge here? What are the problems that are going to get in our way and the barriers, okay? So for the first hat, for the red hat, we're going to just shout it out because it's an easy one. And then the green hat, we're going to go to the tables, and our facilitators will just kind of talk to you about what your green hat is. What's your biggest, boldest idea for the riverfront? And please, be bold. Don't let anything hold you back. And if anybody black hats you while you're green hatting, facilitators, it's important. You go, black hat. Because people will black hat. I promise you, every table will have that one person. I don't know which one you are, but you will start black hatting when you should be green hatting. But Devano's idea here is that when you're wearing your green hat, no one's standing in your way and everyone's building on each other's positive energy, okay? So we're gonna do that together. So let's start with red hats. We're just gonna shout it out. When you think about the river, I'm not kidding, how does it make you feel?
Gross.
Depressed?
It's gross.
It's gross and dirty. Okay. Oh, so how does that make you feel though, Fred? That's a statement of fact. How does it make you feel? Grossed out.
Amazing opportunity. Yeah, see?
What's that?
Amazing opportunity.
Amazing opportunity. Gross and dirty, amazing opportunity. Yes? Hopeful. Elsa?
Accessible?
Inaccessible. Out of reach, yes.
It's flooded downtown in the past.
So a little scared. Remember people were talking emotions. Tell me how you feel. So it's a little scary. A little risky. Yeah.
Wild, as it's not tame, it's wild. It's
Yeah.
all trees and mud and wild.
How does that make you feel?
Wild.
Come on, there's a lot of other people who haven't shared their feelings yet. We're going to stay here till everyone shares a feeling. So come on. Calm.
Exciting.
Worried.
We got a little worry up here. Sometimes they can be negative feelings. That's okay.
Adventurous.
Adventurous.
Powerful.
Yes. Powerful. Rivers are powerful.
Peaceful.
Nice. Thank you. Wild, peaceful, romantic. Feel a little romantic. Feel a little proud. Anyone feel a little proud when they think about the river? A little like, oh, I'm a human being and I'm here right now and I'm in this great city and this great river. Okay, I think you guys are ready to green hat. You're all looking at me like everybody's okay, so we're gonna take, let's see, how much time do we have? How much time did I yap? Okay, we're gonna take about 15 minutes to green hat. And I'll walk around and just make sure it's going okay, but please, no black hat in the green hats. Biggest, boldest.
Venture into something like this, other than to have just another kind of human program? Can you expand on that?
Yeah, gathers a space that allows people to come down to the water. I think, and that's when you work with.
In that instance, for
Keeping it natural is kind of okay. There's certain segments of habitat that are you know, as far as hunting is the in particular for those economic things that get built that rely on the water. I would like to figure out how to use flood control project.
Yeah. There needs to be some type of bridge, like, it would be nice if there were multiple bridges. I really like that
I'm
idea.
dreaming so big. We moved to O'Reilly Boulevard, but I also think there'd be a way to connect the two and make it more
What they've done in Fort Worth is instead of having bridges, they have crossovers. So then when the water's flooded, it just runs over.
It's right on the corner. It used to be an office store.
America?
If you look right in the corner, it's on the corner, and it has the black and white checkered flooring when you first get in the door. Yes.
Yeah, it's not there anymore.
I can't think what it is. It's an older store. It's
Teller's department store way back in the day.
and then it was
Oh yeah, office.
not that many people go to the mall anymore. That's how malls are going. So if we want to be
Yeah.
I keep saying the mall needs to turn into a school.
Think big, you know, that open that.
Because there's a lot of once you're lower income and the higher income that they
become potential entertainment destinations and things like that.
Existing, there's some like. Oh, you could have like some sort of outdoor on here saying, hey, boat ramp, bikes, whatever.
Well, you've got bike trails from this point all the way to the other.
Yeah, it's all the way up.
And there's a handful of local folks that have maintained those trails for 20 years now. How do you maybe respect
I think living not be in the middle.
There's a lot of potential.
What would you guys envision it as? Do you think it would be more open space?
I think I'm also really excited about like what does it take to get the cement factory clean?
Could be reimagined, be like a
But, you know, if points could continue.
But the big culprit right now, and you get it, is connectivity to linear. Linear has no spokes in the town necessarily. And with our sales tax we just passed last year, I mean, $2 million towards trail enhancement. But the big idea is, linear will one day be a complete loop around the city, but those
I think having a marina would be neat for like kayaks and stand-up boards.
That community is getting pretty big.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that guy is like doubling down on that area. So it'd be really cool to have a better launch point from up here. I think even if there's restaurants, there's a restaurants on the positive side.
Hello everyone. One more minute. Final green hats. Not very loud. He's on here.
I think they heard it.
So that's why when you go to the mall today, that's why they kind of tried to retain the points corridor through the city. That's why it's called East Points. Because this was Military Trail Road. This was an historic entryway to. This road's like 200 years old because it was built by the Army for access to Fort Riley. So this is Military Trail going all the way to Junction City. Yep. Fort Riley. So to kind of maybe I think the next problem.
Where my facilitators? I want to do like kindergarten teachers do and be like, what do they do? Like waterfall. We're quieting down now. Okay, we're gonna report back, everyone. Hey, Chatty, I'm looking at you. Okay, we're gonna do a quick report back. So I'm gonna call on each table, take a moment to figure out who's gonna stand up and report back. And it doesn't have to be the facilitator if there's a brave soul. But we have a lot of tables, so we're just gonna do like 30 seconds to a minute at each table, okay? So starting with Elsa. You can just yell out what were the big ideas from your table. Yeah.
Basically, your map. This is Points Ave, and this is the mall that ends Points Ave, and our main idea was to maybe not get rid of it, but break open like the viewpoint from Points Ave so you can have access to the river, and there's like a continuous connection to Fairmont Park across the river, and then have a connection down this road, which I don't remember the road name, 3rd Street, which is like the nice area where the Blue Ridge Plaza is, and then you have access to the linear trail run that way too. And then it was a continuous running loop.
Oh, nice.
And then this area where like all this parking lots are for the mall would be transformed into like a gateway park where they know the homecoming parade starts, so they could like still start there and be more.
Every parade. Thank you. Awesome. And I know those of you are like, oh my God, we didn't do drawings. It's okay. It can just be words. Who's next? Who's our next facilitator? Hey. Yep, here it comes.
Okay,
urbanizing the area. The current location that we are is kind of the new expansion, and so we have great opportunities to just keep going in this direction. We also talked about creating a performance space somewhere along the river, having better trail connections visually and physically, and lastly, enhancing the river recreation that is already happening. So.
Beautiful, thank you. Good report back too, well done. Who's next? Yes, yes, you in the gray jacket, you in the raspberry. Do it together. Do it together. Do it together.
Okay, I'm a community member. So ours was not nearly as sustained, but it was kind of a brainstorm. And we also had the ideas of, I don't know your name, Dee Dee. Was talking about the 3rd Street connection, talking about coming off of Point, so we want to second that. And then also working to build out Fairmont Park to touch into the river so that people don't feel so disconnected, because that was a theme that we noticed was just a big feeling of disconnection from the river. And so creating gathering spaces, multi-use spaces that are resilient to flooding, that was a big thing that we were talking about, is how do we were trying to keep our black cats off, but recognize that flooding is an issue, and so making it resilient to flooding.
Awesome, thanks for avoiding the black hat trap.
It was really hard.
It is hard. Who's next? How many people, before you do it, how many people had a black hatter at the table? Oh yeah, they were like, we were the black hatter. It's just who you are. It's just like I grew up here, it's just who I am. Okay. All right.
So we talked a lot about having a good pedestrian connection bank to bank, and visually and physically. Also having better places for kids to play, and putting back some of the green space that's being taken out from parking lots and things like that. And just having like moments of joy where you could maybe zip line or trampoline. Also talking about controlling the water flow to be able to, you know, have different program elements on the space.
Thank you.
Yes.
So someone wanted a trampoline?
Oh yeah, the built-in trampoline into the ground, right?
Yeah, I can see it. There's we're in what community? In Indiana, on the White River, they hammock under the bridges. Green Bay, people's greenhouse.
Okay.
Hi, Matt.
Hey. So we wanted something for everyone. We saw opportunities to have a venue for Country Stampede and Praise Fest. We thought a floating stage might be cool. And there's a lot of opportunities for regional connections as well, and economic development, densifying the area, expanding downtown. And there's also a lot of educational opportunities, both about the natural environment, but also about the history of Manhattan.
Beautiful, thank you. Nicely done.
Thank you.
That's good. Yes.
No, we got
I know, you stood up during report back. I was like, oh, please.
What did we say? What was the name of the steamboat again?
Hartford.
The Hartford, Museum for the Hartford.
Okay, thank you. Say hi to the kids.
Okay, so we looked at, we were wondering about different ways to address the flooding. So whether it's an overpass or even an underpass, and then also thinking about how we could utilize all of the different, spaces that aren't as well used right now. So what will it take to move the Manhattan Concrete Company? And then also what can we use for that spaces, like urbanizing more of the riverfront with bars, restaurants. We also talked about a need for live music. So thinking about the amphitheater, they really liked that amphitheater that you had showed on the slideshow. And then also maximizing the boat ramp usage. So.
Beautiful, thank you. Where do we have this guy? Oh, hello, friend.
Hi. So we had developed a system of manageable chunks that would be like a domino effect to transform this river that it is today into like a really celebrated space for Manhattan. And it all starts with connectivity, as so many other groups have mentioned, but thinking more than just connectivity along linear trail and along the riverfront, but also connectivity through the city and through the town, which can then help inspire development along 3rd and 4th Street to do that commercial development that we're seeing in Manhattan currently, which would then drive some recreational development along the riverfront on the Manhattan side, which then calls for a pedestrian bridge to connect both sides of the river, which will then inspire Fairmount Park to get bigger and better and more of a community space all along the river.
Wow, awesome. Master plan done. Yeah, 2 more, right? Here.
Okay, so everybody's been mentioning connectivity, and I'm going to say it again. We mentioned connecting the river to downtown, connecting across the river, the visual connectivity from different parts of Manhattan along the river, especially we noted Kansas Hill. You can kind of see the river, but having a clearer view from there. And then also different ways where we can include human programming, things that are more our scale, like a concert venue and more gathering spaces, interacting with the water, kayaking, things like that. And then also maybe bringing the river and pieces of that waterfront into the city to break up our concrete downtown spaces and use that as sort of an educational opportunity about flooding in Manhattan and our ecosystems here.
Thank you. Wonderful. Last one. Hi.
Okay, so we kind of looked at how to bring people to the area, but also how to mitigate the environmental issues. So obviously flooding, big way to figure out how to incorporate recreation into that and mitigate the effects. Incorporating connections to the community and regional aspect because of the role that Manhattan plays in the larger community, and creating connections between downtown, and incorporating the local habitat, creating gardens that would invite people into the space, and focusing on features that would emphasize safety with lighting as a big idea, and then incorporating entertainment, like we talked about, that would be low impact, that wouldn't disturb the area too much, and creating draws with business that would also bring people into the area.
Thank you.
Riverboat Casino.
Yeah. Sorry.
Did you say Riverboat Casino?
Yes, sorry.
Are there casinos in Kansas?
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so at around 8:30, caravan into the casino. Okay. So, wonderful green hats. Facilitators, please keep that piece of paper because we're going to photograph them and document all the sketches, so just set them aside. I'm sorry, it kind of feels like a downer. We're going to black hat. Ready to black hat? We can do this one more quickly. We'll just do this for 5 to 10 minutes. So just think about what are the barriers, what are the challenges, like flood, for instance. That happens back on. What do we need to think about?
I think businesses are going to be hard to move what your thoughts are. And I'd also like you to draw what you see as the barriers and the challenges on your map.
I've got to take a drink first.
This is water. Don't worry. This is water. Group? Yeah. Money Manhattan is a tax. Taxes are always crazy, and it will take more taxes, but at the same time, the population loves to spend money, or at least some of it, enough of it that lack political will.
It's so hard to say that.
Another thing with the flooding, when the Chicagoers went to, they talked about how they were trying to account for that, but that's a little different system. With ours, it's not as predictable. The Corps of Engineers does whatever the hell they want of a ton, and that level could vary 3 feet.
confident in that.
You have not still augmented its banks.
Yeah, it can be done. It's
Anything
just,
can be done.
It has to be planned at the right
The
time.
core is not easy to work.
No,
Yeah,
that's big. It just has to be planned at the right time with them, or else.
I mean, and this is right there with moving that business to where, you know, if
The important part on the funding piece is that it needs to be commercially driven. That's all critique, that critique.
Yeah, we're talking about blowing up whole intersections. That's a complete reroute of traffic that we don't have infrastructure for.
But right now is no private ownership.
I mean, I feel like it'd be impossible to remove any of the parking. I mean, it's probably the requirement of parking. So, you know, like making like a viewpoint through here would be
Like a ramp.
difficult.
Like a ramp that just connected the linear park trail and the sidewalk that's already on the bridge. I think that was actually done. Nope. Or not done. I mean, it was back in the day, right? There was all sorts of fun.
The lane that goes from
Oh, thank you. Thank you. It's funny. Yeah, I was telling you what, I'm like 1,000% already. I'm just like shut down. I can't talk to you. To my family. I can't talk to you. Yeah, I know. They're like, oh, she's charming and sweet. No, she's not. Oh, I work every minute of every day. I have not stopped working since January. I can't complain even though I'm complaining.
I mean, seriously, that's what we.
Lauren's table's ready. Okay, I think that was that enough time for black hatting? Are we done black hatting? Yeah. All right, everyone. Table 1 and Table 2 are done black hatting. They are optimists all the way. Table 3? Yeah? Done? Okay, we're going to stop black hatting. We're going to stop black hatting. We're going to start reporting back. I'm going to keep talking till it's quiet. What is it, rainfall? What is it? 2, I don't know, what is it? Okay, who wants to go first this time and get over with the black hats? Okay, hi.
So, Dee brought up kind of the biggest challenge is just cost.
Money. All right, you guys cross it off your list if you had money. Just kidding. Check.
Pretty much got that out of the way right away.
Okay, well.
And we also thought a lot about the stormwater drainage going into the river and the pollution that it's causing.
Stormwater pollution.
How that is handled. The connection, obviously, is a big thing that we've been talking about a lot lately. But also just how much parking is in the area. There's a lot of parking.
Yep.
So we actually had a good idea kind of come out of that. Is if we develop more area, we'll need more parking. And we actually have an idea about using the existing mall parking because that's not largely used.
So what's happening up here, people, this is really important. I don't know if you just saw that. She just took a black hat and made it into a green hat. She said, there's a lot of parking. That was pretty powerful. She said, there's a lot of parking, but we had this idea that maybe the parking at the mall could become more useful because it's not used all the time. So, way to turn a black hat green.
I think that's mostly what we talked about. So.
Thank you. Awesome, thank you. All right, who's next? Hi, Mac. We got Mac in the back. We got 2 Macs in the back.
Alright, so we also talked about funding, but we also talked about the railroad as how noisy it is. It's a barrier, and it's not very safe. The homeless population that chooses to live in the area. Also the issue with flooding, erosion, and if Manhattan's even ready for this, if we're ready for a lot of development to come into the south side of downtown. So that's about it.
Thank you. Awesome.
I'll go next.
Mac number 2.
Yeah, the other Mac. So we talked about a lot of the issues that have been talked about so far. We have a table of optimists.
Yay!
But we talked about potential challenges with coordinating with the Corps of Engineers and KDOT, as well as potentially disturbing certain ecosystems.
Thank you.
So we'll go ahead and go. We talked about the same areas that we're moving the railroad and the road, and moving the concrete company. So we're moving those established businesses and the potential of remediation that would need to occur along the river. And then some of our ideas need the permits that would require to actually go into the river itself.
Thank you. Who next? Elsa, I think that means it's you.
Okay, so we talked about most of what everyone else said, but we also thought of like how people in the community will be scared of flooding if we do anything with the river and change anything in that area, and how like storms are bad now, but they're going to get worse in the future, so that means flooding will get worse. So not just designing for flooding now, but what's going to happen in the future for that. And then the levy and the Army Corps of Engineers talked about that and getting permits and we even touch it. And the private property, the places and businesses are my concept of the
Thank you. Oh.
and the lack of political will.
Oh. We have some, yeah, I was going to put some city people on the spot, by the way. 1 more? 2 more? 2 more. Maybe 3. Okay.
One of the other things about the flooding that's unique around here is that it's unpredictable. Unlike we talked about how it's different from the Chicago, whereas that's a little more controlled, so here it's unpredictable and we can't really do a whole lot about it right now. And then resistance for moving businesses that are already established there. And then just the amount of cleanup and work that would have to go into prepping the site for any sort of change, as well as looking down the road when this is implemented, how is the maintenance going to be handled around here? That's going to be a huge concern.
Thank you. 2 more, right? Oh, we have a dog. Hi.
Some of the things that we discussed that haven't been mentioned yet, we also talked about the KDOT right-of-way, and then we also talked about it might be a potential opportunity since KDOT's currently studying West 77 in terms of its effectiveness and how it's functioning. And then we also discussed how the 4 roads that are in this area are all very highly trafficked and have high traffic counts, and how that could be potentially problematic since there are some of the major east-west and north-south continuous roads that go through the community. And then we also talked about if we were to cross the river, how we might have to meet some community resistance from the people who live in the Fairmont Park area, just because they're used to a slower lifestyle and they're not going to be used to all the urbanization that might be some of the reasons why they chose to purchase a home at that site.
That's right. Call that NIMBYism, not in my backyard, yes. 1 more, right? Hi, Danielle.
So the big theme we're sort of kind of touched on is budget. Incorporating how the municipal, the governments, Raleigh County and Cobb County will interact to be able to go about making developments of the site. The site is kind of on the edge of town, so there isn't a lot of things kind of going around there. It's kind of out of the way for people to get to from the major areas of where things are happening. And then looking at Manhattan expanding sort of connecting the 2 sites, and then again looking at the flood issues. And incorporating low impact development areas that enhance the site that are around it.
Thank you. 1 more? Final, last but not least. Bring us home.
So aside from things like Corps of Engineers and the right-of-ways and all those barriers, a big thing we talked about is visibility and just how you don't see the river at all. And then if you open up lines of sight, like what would that mean for development?
Is that it? That all our black hats? Okay, so we are effectively through our hats. Let's say a couple things. First of all, thank you all so much for coming out tonight. I think about, well, I just want to acknowledge Mr. Anderson to my right, who, you can clap, okay. Great things don't happen without great leadership, and he's been this tireless advocate, and it's new to him. He was saying today that planning and landscape architecture is not language that he's been trained in. He's from theater and now runs a bed and breakfast, so he's learning lots of things about flood dynamics and levees and flood control and river systems. But you think about these amazing transformational projects like the High Line in New York City. That was one person's dream, and they started spreading the word, and other people started seeing it, and they made it happen. And so I think, thank you so much, Phil, for having me. It's been a real joy, and let's make it happen. When you think about what making it happen means, we don't know. I'm visiting because I have a special set of skills that Phil thought could be applied here. We've had a lot of conversation today. We're meeting with the mayor in the morning. We're doing a radio show. And so we've tried to be really effective about just getting the word out that there's interest in the river. And I have to say, I feel really optimistic that some people heard that today and saw Phil's passion, the potential of this riverfront, and I think it could catch. So let's hope. Let's continue to spread the word. We're going to be talking about what a master plan or a planning effort could look like on the riverfront, who are the right people to sort of take that on and lead it, who has capacity and interest. And I promise you, I think there's some real there's some real interest. And so what I'm going to do is have the teams help document all of this thinking and summarize it and give that to Phil and team, and so that we'll have a good document. And we've already started with some incredibly aligned black hats and some aspirational green hats. And so one last thing before we go, which is just I want to thank the student facilitators, many of whom you see the work from the studio they did on the riverfront. So they started this dream with Phil as well, and the faculty at KSU. It's just lovely work. A lot of the ideas we talked about today, some ideas that are really out of the box and beautiful. And so let's keep green hatting together, and let's hope we can change this river for generations to come. So thank you all for being part of what is likely first steps. So thank you.